The night market was hidden in the ruins of an old cargo bay. Broken metal beams stood like dead trees around the clearing. Rusted wires hung down from the ceiling and swayed in the cold wind. Dim lamps burned on poles, their yellow light flickering like dying stars. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and cheap liquor. Voices echoed in the hollow space, sharp, loud, and cruel. At the center of the market, a platform of cracked wood had been built. It was used for selling scrap machines, stolen parts, and sometimes living things. Tonight, something living stood there. She was thin, her bones showing through pale blue skin. Shackles locked her wrists together. Dust covered her hair like ashes. Her eyes were dull and empty. She did not look at the crowd. She only stared at the floor, silent and still as if she was already gone. The auctioneer was a tall alien with orange scales and teeth shaped like hooks. He raised his clawed hands and shouted about her value. He said she was weak, broken, and useless. He said her kind had been wiped out in the war. He laughed and called her trash. The crowd laughed with him. Some threw empty bottles toward the platform. Others shouted low offers just to mock her. They said she was not worth even the rusted chain that held her. The bidding was not real. It was a game to them. The crowd wanted to see how low the price could fall. They wanted to see how far a soul could sink. A short lizard creature lifted 2 bottles of strong liquor and waved them high. The auctioneer grinned with sharp teeth and slammed the wooden floor. He called it a winning bid. Another alien rolled a broken shopping cart forward and pushed it to the front. The auctioneer clapped his claws together and declared her sold. The crowd cheered like it was a joke. She did not move. Her lips stayed still, her eyes still on the floor. The chains were unlocked and fell with a dull sound. She slid to her knees, weak from hunger. The lizard creature stepped forward to drag her away, but a new voice spoke from the back of the crowd. "I'll take her." The voice was human. Everyone turned. A tall human stood in the shadows near a broken wall. He wore a faded long coat and heavy boots covered in dust. His face was calm and unreadable. A faint scar crossed his cheek like an old memory. His hands were empty, no weapon, no threat. Only his eyes held something cold and quiet. The auctioneer blinked, confused. "You? For what price?" The human walked forward. He pushed the shopping cart closer to her and set 2 bottles of liquor on the ground. "For this, and the cart," the crowd howled with laughter. They shouted that he was mad. They said she would die before sunrise. They said he was wasting his drink on broken bones. The human said nothing. He lifted her gently from the ground and placed her in the cart. She was light like lifting empty cloth. She did not resist. Her head rested on the cold metal bars. Her eyes did not rise. The auctioneer shrugged and waved him off. The deal was made. The chains were left on the floor like forgotten scraps. The human pushed the cart through the laughing crowd. The squeaky wheels echoed across the ruined bay. Bottles smashed on the floor behind him. No one followed. No one cared. The cold wind cut through the broken walls as he left the market. Night stretched ahead like a black ocean. The cracked ground glittered with frost. The cart rattled on every stone. He walked in silence, his boots leaving deep marks in the dust. She lay still in the cart, her thin frame trembling from the cold. The long coat he wore shifted with every step, dark and heavy like a shadow that would not let go. Far behind them, the laughter of the crowd faded into the dark. The market lights grew smaller and smaller until they were gone. Only the sound of the squeaky wheels and the lonely wind remained. The human did not look back. She did not speak. The night swallowed them both as if they had never been there. The wind was sharp as knives as the human pushed the cart away from the broken marketplace. The wheels squeaked on every stone, a thin sound cutting through the vast emptiness around them. The night was cold enough to crack old steel. Broken towers rose on each side like the bones of giants, hollow and silent. The sky was dark with storm clouds that hid the stars. Only the glow of the human's lantern swung back and forth on the cart, throwing pale gold light on the path. She lay curled inside the shopping cart, knees pulled close to her chest. The metal bars pressed into her thin skin. Every jolt of the wheels made her body flinch, but she stayed quiet. Her breath came in shallow bursts, misting the cold air. Her eyes were half open, but they did not see the ruins passing by. It was like her spirit had stayed behind on that wooden platform. The human walked slowly, not speaking. His boots crunched on gravel and glass. He did not glance at her, yet every few steps he pushed the coat around her shoulders again to keep it from sliding off. It was too large for her, the sleeves covering her hands like long shadows. The scent of him clung to the fabric, metal, oil, and dry earth. She did not understand why he gave it to her. No one had given her anything in a long time. A bridge of cracked concrete loomed ahead. The human pushed the cart up its slope. The wind roared louder there, carrying distant echoes of the market behind them. She listened to those echoes fade. Somewhere far away, the laughter of the crowd still danced in her skull, sharp and cruel. She pressed her fingers over her ears, but it did not stop. A soft sound escaped her throat, but he did not turn. At the top of the bridge, the human stopped. He set down the lantern on the edge and stood still. His chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths. He scanned the horizon with watchful eyes. Far below, the wasteland stretched like a broken ocean, filled with shattered machines and skeletal buildings. Faint blue lightning flickered between storm clouds. No sign of life moved anywhere. She shivered. Her teeth clicked softly. The sound made him glance down at her for the first time since they left. His eyes were dark, unreadable. He reached into his bag and pulled out a thin thermal blanket. Without a word, he wrapped it around her, tucking the corners under her feet like he had done this many times before. The warmth spread slowly through her shaking limbs. For a moment, she felt something she had forgotten: safety. The human picked up the lantern again and they moved on. The bridge ended in a cracked highway. Old signs hung crooked on rusted poles, their paint peeled away by decades of storms. The human walked between the fallen beams with silent steps. Every few minutes he checked the shadows around them, eyes sharp and cold. He walked like someone who expected danger at every turn. She watched him from the corner of her vision. He was strange. He had not smiled, not spoken, not even asked her name. Yet he carried her with care, as if she was something fragile. She could not understand why. People did not save things they thought were broken. People walked away. People left, always. She tightened the coat around her chest and closed her eyes. Hours passed like slow waves. The night deepened. The lantern flickered low. At last the human stopped again. Ahead of them stood an old checkpoint gate buried in drifting sand. The roof had collapsed long ago and vines crawled through the cracks of its walls. He checked the corners carefully, then pushed the cart through the gap in the fence. Behind the gate lay a forgotten road, half buried, hidden from the world. The wind was calmer here. The sound of the city was gone. Only the faint buzz of insects remained. The human placed the lantern on the cart and took off his gloves. His hands were scarred and rough. He rubbed them together for warmth and looked up at the torn moon. His face stayed calm, but there was a tiredness in his eyes that no rest could fix. She stared at him while he looked away. He was not like the others. The others had laughed when they sold her. This man had said nothing. He had not called her worthless. He had not asked what she could do or why she was still alive. He had only taken her and carried her through the cold. She did not know if that made him a fool or something else. She did not know which one she wanted him to be. Her eyes grew heavy. The rhythm of the wheels and the steady crunch of his boots became a lullaby. She let her head fall against the metal bars and drifted into uneasy sleep. He kept walking through the silence, the lantern swaying, the coat flapping around her like dark wings. The night swallowed them both again. But this time, the silence was softer. Dawn crept over the ruins like a pale ghost. The sky turned from black to deep gray, and the edges of broken buildings glimmered with frost. The lantern in the human's hand had burned out, leaving only the dim glow of morning. He walked slower now, his boots crunching softly on gravel. The cart rattled with every crack in the road. The alien girl stirred inside it, blinking at the faint light. Her limbs ached, but they were no longer numb. Ahead of them rose a freight station long forgotten by the world. Its sign had fallen, and weeds wrapped around its iron frame like strangling hands. The windows were cracked and dark. No machines worked here anymore. The air was still, carrying only the smell of rust and dust. It was the kind of place where people came to disappear and never returned. The human stopped at the wide doorway. He stood silent, scanning the shadows. His eyes moved over every crack, every dangling wire, every hole in the roof. He moved with quiet caution, like someone who had walked into ambushes before. She watched him, confused by his care. If this place was empty, why fear it so much? When he stepped inside, the air grew colder. Dust drifted down from the ceiling with every footstep. The floor was covered in old metal crates and shattered glass. He pushed the cart carefully through the debris, the wheels squealing in protest. She gripped the sides of the cart, not out of fear but out of instinct, as if falling would shatter her completely. They reached a small office at the far corner of the station. Its door was half broken and hung on one hinge. He kicked it gently open. The room was dry, though the air was stale and heavy. A single bed frame stood in the corner, its mattress torn. A table leaned against the wall, covered in dust and broken wires. A cracked mirror reflected their shapes as shadows. The human left the cart by the wall and began clearing the floor. He swept aside shards of glass with his boot, then pulled out a folded thermal sheet from his bag. He spread it on the bed frame with quiet focus. His movements were careful and slow, like someone handling fragile glass. She watched him without blinking. No one had ever done this for her. No one had ever prepared a place for her to rest. He set down a small heater from his pack and clicked it on. A weak orange glow filled the room. Warmth crawled into the air like timid fingers. She felt it on her skin and drew the coat tighter around her chest. For the first time, the cold was not cutting her bones. It was strange. It was almost frightening. The human opened a bottle of clean water and held it out to her. She hesitated. Her eyes narrowed, expecting poison, expecting tricks. He did not speak, did not push her. He simply waited, his arm steady. Slowly, she reached for it. Her hands trembled as she raised it to her lips. The water was cool and pure. It slid down her throat like silver. She drank every drop. When she lowered the bottle, he was still watching her. His face showed nothing, only calm patience. He took the empty bottle, placed it aside, and turned to the heater. She sat still, staring at his back. Something strange flickered in her chest, small and soft, like the heater's first spark of light. She had thought warmth was gone from the world. Yet here it was, in a place no one visited. Later, he pulled off his boots and sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. He placed his coat over her legs before lying down. His eyes closed almost at once, exhaustion pulling him into sleep. She lay on the torn mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. The heater hummed softly between them. The sound was gentle and steady, unlike anything from her old world of chains and noise. Her gaze drifted to the table. Under the layer of dust lay a photo in a broken frame. It showed a group of humans in spacesuits standing on a steel platform. One of them looked like him, younger and smiling. She reached for it with cautious fingers. Before she could touch it, he spoke without opening his eyes. "Leave it." She froze. His voice was quiet but firm. She pulled her hand back. He reached out, turned the photo face down, and said nothing more. His eyes stayed closed, but his jaw tightened for a moment. Then his breathing slowed again. She lay back on the bed, staring at the shadows. She wondered who he had lost. She wondered why he still carried her when he seemed already broken himself. The heater's glow danced on the walls as sleep pulled at her eyes. In the silence of the forgotten station, she closed her eyes under his coat. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. When she woke, the air inside the old freight station was warmer than before. Pale light slipped through the cracks in the ceiling. Dust floated like drifting snow. The heater hummed softly in the corner, still glowing. She blinked slowly, her mind unsure where she was for a moment. Then the memory returned. The cart, the market, the human who had taken her without reason. He was already awake, sitting near the doorway. He had taken apart the broken door and was cutting the wood into small pieces with a rusted blade. The sound of metal scraping against dry wood echoed through the empty building. He worked without looking at her, his movements calm and practiced. Each piece he stacked neatly beside him like he had done this many times before. She sat up on the torn mattress. Her body felt heavier but stronger than last night. The coat was still wrapped around her legs, warm from the heater. She pulled it tighter and watched him silently. There was something strange about how he moved, as if every action was measured and chosen. Not like the chaotic motions of traders and scavengers she had seen all her life. This man carried silence like armor. He stood and placed the wood in a circle on the concrete floor. A small spark from his lighter caught the dry pieces and thin flames began to rise. The warmth reached her even from across the room. She had forgotten the smell of burning wood. It was soft and clean. It felt like something from a world that no longer existed. After a while, he left the fire burning low and walked to the table. He opened an old metal box and pulled out dried food packs. He placed one near her on the mattress and one for himself. He did not speak. She opened it carefully. The smell was plain but good. Her hands trembled as she ate. The taste was simple and dry, yet it felt richer than anything she had eaten in years. He finished his quietly, eyes always scanning the doorway like a soldier. When they were done, he gathered the wrappers and placed them back in the box. She watched as he wiped the dust from the table with slow, steady movements. Something caught her eye. The photo frame she had seen the night before, still lying face down. She stared at it while he packed away the supplies. Curiosity stirred in her chest like a slow spark waking from ash. When he turned away to check the fire, she reached for the frame. Her fingers brushed the cracked glass. She lifted it carefully. The image showed 5 humans standing together on a steel platform. They wore dark spacesuits with silver visors lifted. All of them were smiling. The man in the center was him, younger, alive in a way he was not now. His arm was around a woman with bright eyes, and their faces glowed with something she did not know how to name. Her chest tightened. She traced his younger face with her thumb. This man had once belonged somewhere. He had once smiled like the sun. She wondered what had burned that smile away. He turned then and froze. The fire crackled behind him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. His eyes locked on the photo in her hands. They were not angry, just full of something deep and heavy. He crossed the room, took the photo gently from her fingers, and set it back down on the table, face down again. "She is gone," he said quietly. His voice was rough, as if speaking cost him effort. Then he walked back to the fire and sat. He stared into the flames without another word. His shoulders were rigid. His hands were clenched, even though they rested still on his knees. The light of the fire danced in his eyes but did not reach them. She looked at him and felt something shift inside her chest. She had thought pain belonged only to her kind. She had thought humans were too strong to break. But this one was broken, just like her. Maybe even worse, because he still stood while shattered inside. She lay back on the mattress, pulling the coat over her shoulders. The warmth of the heater wrapped around her like soft hands. The fire crackled gently in the center of the room. She closed her eyes, but the image of his younger smile burned behind them. She wondered what it would take to see that smile again, and for the first time she wanted to try. The sun had slipped low by the time the human returned from outside. The light through the cracked windows was a deep orange, stretching long shadows across the dusty floor. He carried a metal can of water and a bundle of scrap wires. His boots left faint prints in the ash-like dust. She sat on the mattress near the heater, her knees drawn up and eyes half closed. The warmth had softened her bones, but her mind stayed sharp, listening to every sound beyond the walls. He placed the can near the heater and began cutting the wires into thin strips. She watched the movement of his hands, when precise, silent, and steady. It reminded her of how wild animals move when they are hunting, quiet and coiled like springs. He did not speak, but his eyes flicked to the door every few moments. Something in his body was tense, like he had felt a shift in the air. Outside, the wind had gone still. A faint crunch sounded in the distance. She froze. The human heard it too. He set down the wires and stood slowly. His hand rested on the knife at his belt. The sound came again. Boots on broken glass. Not his boots. He glanced at her and gave a small motion with his hand. "Stay quiet." Shadows moved beyond the cracked windows. 3 figures crept through the ruins, their outlines sharp against the fading light. She knew them. The traders from the market, the ones who had sold her like trash. Their laughter had followed her into her sleep. Now their smell of oil and liquor leaked through the broken walls. Her heart began to pound in her chest like a trapped bird. The human stepped silently to the door and leaned against the wall, hidden in shadow. His eyes were narrow, cold, and clear. The men entered the station slowly, whispering in their guttural voices. Rusted metal creaked under their feet. They carried iron rods and jagged blades. One of them sniffed the air like a scavenger beast. "She's here," one hissed, "the little lost thing." The tallest grinned, teeth broken and sharp. "We can sell her again, this time, piece by piece." Their words made her chest tighten. She wanted to shrink into the mattress and vanish, but the human stepped out from the shadows like a silent storm. He stood between them and her, shoulders squared, knife in hand. His voice cut the air like a blade. "She stays." The traders stopped. Then they laughed, loud and wild. Their echo shook the empty station. The tallest pointed at him. You think you can keep her? She is nothing, just bones and dust. She is mine now, he said calmly. The words were quiet, but they struck like thunder. His stance did not waver. No fear showed on his face. Only resolve. It was not the sound of someone making a threat. It was the sound of someone who had already decided what he would die for. The laughter broke into snarls. The three rushed him at once. Metal clashed as his knife flashed in the dying light. He moved fast, striking like lightning, blocking their blows with brutal precision. Dust flew as feet slammed the floor. The heater toppled and rolled away, its glow spilling across the walls. She pressed herself against the bed frame, eyes wide, heart screaming in her chest. The fight was chaos. One thug swung a rod that smashed into the wall, sending sparks across the ground. The human ducked and drove his shoulder into the man's ribs, slamming him down. Another swung from behind, cutting his arm. Blood streaked down his sleeve, but he did not stop. He spun, elbow cracking into the attacker's jaw. Bones snapped like dry wood. The tallest traitor charged, roaring. The human caught the blade in his hand, blood running from his palm, and drove his knee into the man's chest. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the station. The man crashed to the ground, gasping. The other two staggered back, eyes wide now, no laughter left in them. The human stood in the center, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm, knife still steady. Leave, he said. The word was cold as steel. They did. They grabbed their wounded and fled into the dark ruins, vanishing like rats back into the cracks of the world. Their footsteps faded, swallowed by the silence outside. The wind returned, low and hollow through the broken walls. The human lowered his knife. His arm trembled from blood loss. He swayed, caught himself on the table, and dropped to his knees. The fire in his eyes dimmed, leaving only exhaustion. She rushed from the mattress and knelt beside him, hands shaking. He looked at her, face pale. He tried to speak, but no sound came. He had stood against death for her, though she had given him nothing. She touched his wounded arm. Her fingers began to glow faintly, a soft blue light from deep within her bones. Power she had not felt in years sparked to life. As she pressed her hands over his wound, tears fell from her eyes. Her voice broke as she whispered to him for the first time. Why save me? He closed his eyes and did not answer. Her hands glowed like moonlight as they pressed against his torn flesh. Warm energy pulsed from her skin, flowing into the deep cut in his arm. The bleeding slowed. His skin trembled under her touch, then slowly knit together, red, fading into pale scars. The glow flickered weakly, as if unsure it should return after so long buried. She breathed hard, her body shaking as the power drained her. It had been years since she had used her healing gift. She had thought it gone, burned out with her people, left in the ashes of her old world. Yet here it was again, rising from the darkness inside her like a forgotten ember. He opened his eyes and stared at her. His face was pale, but his gaze was steady. He said nothing, only watched the light fade from her hands. When it vanished, she slumped back, exhausted. Sweat shone on her skin. Her heart thudded like a drum inside her chest. You are different, he said at last, his voice low and rough. She looked away. She had no answer. She had been called many things, broken, cursed, worthless. Different had never sounded gentle until now. He rose slowly, testing his arm. The wound had closed into a thin pink line. He flexed his hand, surprised. He gave a short nod. Not thanks, not praise, just quiet acceptance. Then he picked up the fallen heater, set it upright again, and turned it on. Its orange glow spread across the broken room, chasing away the shadows left from the fight. She wrapped the coat tighter around her thin frame. The warmth felt strange after the cold terror of moments ago. She stared at him as he wiped blood from the floor with an old cloth. He worked in silence, as if cleaning was just another part of survival. Like breathing. He moved slower than before, though, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. He caught her gaze and held it for a long moment. Something soft flickered in his eyes. Not weakness. Something else. Something human. Then he turned and sat with his back to the wall, resting his head against the cracked plaster. "Those men will not return soon," he said, "but others might." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight she could feel. She nodded slowly. She knew this world. It always took what it wanted, and it always came back for more. Silence settled over them. The only sounds were the faint hum of the heater and the distant moan of wind through the hollow station. The tension of the fight bled away. What remained was something new, something fragile. She could not name it, but it sat between them like a small living thing. She lay down on the mattress again, her body heavy from the healing. The glow inside her bones had faded, leaving behind a strange warmth that was not from the heater. She closed her eyes, but sleep did not come. Every time she blinked, she saw him standing against 3 armed men, refusing to move, refusing to let her be taken. She turned her head and watched him from the shadows. His eyes were half closed now, but not in sleep. He stared at the ceiling with the stillness of someone lost far away inside their own mind. The scar on his cheek caught the heater's glow like a thin line of fire. He looked tired yet unbroken. She whispered, barely moving her lips. "You could have let them take me." He did not look at her. "I don't leave people behind." The words struck her harder than any blow. They were spoken like an old rule carved into his bones. She wanted to ask why. She wanted to ask what he had lost, who he had left behind that he still carried like a wound. But her throat closed around the questions. Instead, she closed her eyes. Her breath slowed. The fear that had clung to her since the market began to loosen its claws. For the first time, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Not safety. Something deeper. Belonging. The heater hummed softly. The night wrapped around the station like a quiet blanket. Outside, the wind carried away the last echoes of the trader's laughter. It left behind only silence, and the steady beat of 2 hearts that had chosen not to give up. She drifted into sleep with one last thought burning in her chest. Maybe she was not worthless anymore. The sun rose over the wasteland like a quiet promise. Its golden light slipped through the cracked windows of the old station, turning the dust into drifting gold. The world outside was silent, washed clean by the night wind. Inside, the heater had gone cold, but the air still held the warmth of their shared breath. She woke slowly, her body no longer trembling from cold or fear. The coat had slipped from her shoulders during the night. It smelled faintly of smoke and iron. She pulled it around her again and sat up. The room looked different in the soft morning light. The broken walls seemed less sharp. The silence no longer felt like emptiness. He was sitting near the door, boots laced, pack on his back. He had been watching the horizon through a crack in the wall. When she stirred, he turned his head. His face was calm, but there was something new in his eyes, something lighter. "Not quite a smile, but close. We have to move," he said gently. "This place is not safe anymore." She nodded. There was no fear in the thought of leaving now. The idea of walking into the vast broken world did not crush her chest like it once had. Not while he was there. He stood and held out his hand. She hesitated, then placed her thin fingers in his rough palm. He pulled her to her feet, steady and sure. She wobbled for a moment, then found her balance. The floor no longer felt like it would break beneath her. She was standing, truly standing, but for the first time in years. They gathered what little they had. He gave her a small pack with dried food and a worn jacket he had patched during the night. It was too big, but she slipped it on anyway. The weight of it was strange yet comforting, like wearing a piece of the world that belonged to her now. When they stepped out of the station, the wind met them with a low hum. The sky was clear and wide, painted with streaks of gold. The ruins of the world stretched in every direction, endless and empty. She stared at it without flinching. The silence was no longer a threat. It was a path. He pushed the empty shopping cart beside him, its wheels squeaking softly. She walked beside him, not inside it. Each step felt like breaking through invisible chains. Her legs were weak, but her stride grew steadier with every yard. The earth crunched under her boots, not her bare feet. The cold bit at her cheeks, but it did not sink into her bones. They crossed the broken highway in silence. Not the silence of fear, the silence of understanding. Sometimes he glanced at her and she caught the faint edge of something like pride in his eyes. It stirred a warmth deep in her chest that no heater could give. As the day climbed higher, they stopped on a hill of cracked stone. The wind lifted the strands of her hair and carried them around her face like threads of silver. She looked out at the horizon. For the first time, she did not see a graveyard. She saw distance. She saw places waiting to be reached. He placed his coat on her shoulders without a word. She looked up at him. The sun caught his scar and turned it to gold. He did not smile fully, but the corner of his mouth softened. That small curve felt like a sunrise of its own. She stepped closer until their shoulders touched. Together they stood on the hill, two small shapes against the endless sky. The world had called her worthless. It had sold her for liquor and left her in chains. But she was walking free now, side by side with the one who had seen worth where no one else had looked. The wind rose, carrying their scent away into the new day. He picked up the cart's handle and started down the hill. She followed without hesitation. Their shadows stretched long across the cracked earth, not one behind the other, but side by side. She was not cargo anymore. She was not broken. She was not alone. She was not worthless anymore.